The fleet entered the portal, emerging in a strange twilight realm where normal physics seemed altered. Before them loomed the massive Void command structure, surrounded by hundreds of defender ships. The battle that followed was unlike any before. In the strange physics of the pocket dimension, weapons behaved unpredictably. Ships moved in ways that should have been impossible. The Defiance, led by Captain Grant, spearheaded the assault, clearing a path toward the command structure. But the defenders were fierce, and soon the human fleet began taking heavy losses. "We need to get closer," Captain Grant reported. "The dimensional weapon has to be deployed directly at the core." Admiral Carter made the hardest decision of his career. "Defiance, proceed to the target. We'll cover you." Olivia understood what that meant. This was a one-way mission. "Acknowledged, Admiral. It's been an honor." The Defiance pushed forward, taking hit after hit, its shields failing. As they approached the command structure, Dr. Garcia prepared to launch the weapon. "We need to get closer," he shouted over the sound of the ship breaking apart around them. Captain Grant looked at her crew, humans who had volunteered for this final mission, knowing they might not return. "It's been a privilege serving with you all," she said. Then she gave her final order: ram the target. The Defiance, engines at maximum power, crashed into the command structure. As it penetrated the outer hull, Dr. Garcia launched the dimensional collapse weapon. From the Vengeance, Admiral Carter watched as a blinding light engulfed the command structure. The portal began to collapse. "All ships retreat," he ordered. "Back to normal space." As the fleet escaped the collapsing dimension, the void ships throughout the galaxy suddenly went dark. The war was over. 1 year later, representatives from all surviving species gathered on Earth to form the new Galactic Federation. Ambassador Julia Bennett, who had lost her sister in the final battle, addressed the assembly. "When we entered your war, we were fighting for our survival. What we never expected was to find our destiny among the stars. Humanity has always been shaped by conflict, but what drives us isn't the desire to conquer. It's the will to protect those we care about." She looked around at the faces of 100 different species. "That's the legacy of those who sacrificed everything to end this war. And that's the foundation on which we'll build our future together." 3 years after humanity entered the war, the final battle was about to begin. In a secret facility orbiting Earth, President Susan Blake met with the War Council, a mix of human and alien leaders who had fought side by side against the Void. "Dr. Garcia's team has found it," Susan announced. "The central command structure of the Void Armada, hidden in what they call a pocket dimension, a space that exists alongside our own." The holographic display showed a massive spherical station, larger than any they had encountered before. "This is where it all began," explained Dr. Nancy Chen. "Based on the data we've gathered, this structure was created by the precursors as a weapon against their enemies. But something went wrong. The artificial intelligence they created outlived them, continuing its mission of destruction for thousands of years." Admiral Ryan Carter studied the display. "How do we reach it?" Dr. Paul Garcia stepped forward. "We've developed a dimensional breach device. It will open a portal directly to the command structure, but only for a short time. And once we're there, we'll need to deploy this." He held up a small glowing cylinder, a dimensional collapse weapon. "It will destroy the command structure and everything in that pocket dimension. The Void Armada will be leaderless, disconnected." Captain Olivia Grant, who had commanded the Defiance through dozens of battles, asked the question everyone was thinking. "What about the enslaved beings controlling the ships?" Dr. Chen looked down. "Without the central command, they'll be free, but their ships and life support systems will likely fail. We couldn't find a way to save them." A heavy silence fell over the room. After years of fighting, they had all seen too much death, but they also knew the alternative, allowing the Void to continue its path of destruction through the galaxy. "We have no choice," Susan finally said. "Admiral Carter, assemble the fleet. This ends now." 2 days later, The largest fleet ever gathered in the galaxy assembled near the coordinates where Dr. Garcia's team had located the dimensional breach point. 300 ships from Earth and every surviving coalition world prepared for the final assault. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Admiral Carter addressed the fleet. "Today we fight not just for our worlds, but for all those who have fallen, and for those enslaved by the void. Remember why we're here: to end this war and bring peace back to the galaxy." The fleet moved into position as Dr. Garcia activated the dimensional breach device. Space itself seemed to tear open, revealing a swirling portal of energy. "Portal stable," reported Dr. Garcia, "but it won't last long. All ships, advance," ordered Admiral Carter. 6 months after humanity took command of the coalition forces, the war had changed dramatically. Where once the Void Armada had moved unopposed through the galaxy, now they faced resistance at every turn. Human tactics and weapons, combined with alien technology, had turned the tide. Admiral Ryan Carter stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, the largest warship ever built by human hands. Around him, a crew of humans and aliens worked together, each bringing their unique skills to the battle. "Fleet status report," Ryan ordered. His second-in-command, a Zenthari named Milavon, checked her console. "All ships ready." "Admiral, the coalition forces are in position. The human fleet is awaiting your command." Ryan nodded and looked at the main view screen. Before them lay the Eldorian homeworld, once the jewel of the coalition, now occupied by void forces for nearly a year. Today, they would take it back. "Begin Operation Hammerfall," Ryan ordered. Across 3 sectors of space, 200 ships moved in perfect coordination. Unlike previous coalition fleets that attacked in predictable patterns, this fleet used human battle tactics, feints, ambushes, and strategic sacrifices that confused the Void defenders. On a smaller vessel at the edge of the battle, Dr. Paul Garcia watched the fighting with detached interest. As head of Project Sundering, he cared less about this battle and more about the data it provided. Next to him, Dr. Nancy Chen analyzed incoming sensor readings. "The control signals are getting stronger," she said. "The Void ships near the planet are receiving direct commands from somewhere nearby." Paul nodded. Then our theory was correct. Each sector of Void-controlled space has a local command node. Find it. As the battle raged, Nancy's equipment detected an unusual energy signature coming from the third moon of the Eldorian homeworld. Paul immediately contacted Admiral Carter. "Admiral, we've located a control node on the third moon. If you can destroy it, the Void ships in this sector will be cut off from the central command structure." Ryan received the message and quickly adjusted his strategy. "Captain Grant, take the Defiance and 3 support ships to these coordinates. Destroy whatever you find there." The battle intensified as the human-led fleet pushed toward the planet. Coalition species watched in awe and sometimes horror as humans employed tactics they had never considered, using disabled ships as weapons, deliberately sacrificing small vessels to draw out enemy forces, focusing overwhelming firepower on key targets rather than engaging evenly across the battlefield. On the Coalition command station, President Susan Blake watched with the alien representatives. The Ellerin ambassador turned to her with troubled eyes. "Your methods are effective," he admitted, "but the cost?" Susan nodded grimly. "War always has a cost, but remember what we're fighting for. Not just survival, but freedom for those enslaved by the Void." Recent discoveries by Dr. Chen had confirmed that the beings controlling the Void ships were not willing participants but slaves, their minds connected to the ships they piloted, unable to resist the commands of the central intelligence that guided the Armada. On the third moon, Captain Olivia Grant led her team into an underground facility. They fought through automated defenses until they reached a central chamber. Inside was a pulsing crystalline structure, sending signals to the Void ships. "Plant the charges," Olivia ordered. "We have 5 minutes to get out." As her team rigged explosives around the control node, Olivia noticed strange writing on the walls. the same precursor symbols found on the central command structure. She quickly recorded them for Dr. Garcia's team to analyze. When the explosives detonated, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Half the void ships in the sector suddenly stopped moving. Others began firing randomly, no longer coordinated in their defense. Within hours, the coalition forces had reclaimed the Aldorian homeworld. It was the largest victory against the Void since the war began. As the human and alien troops landed on the planet's surface, they found devastation beyond imagination. The once beautiful cities were in ruins, but they also found survivors, Aldorians who had hidden underground for months, waiting for rescue. An elderly Aldorian approached Admiral Carter as he surveyed the ruined capital city. "When the Void came, we lost all hope," he said, his voice trembling. "Then we heard that humans had entered the war, that everything had changed." He bowed deeply. "Thank you for not forgetting us." Ryan looked across the destroyed landscape, thinking of the ships and lives lost in the battle. "We never forget those who need us," he said simply. "That's the human way." News of humanity's victory at Luna spread across the galaxy. Species that had given up hope suddenly found reason to fight again. Coalition worlds that were preparing to surrender now looked to Earth for leadership. 1 month after the Battle of Luna, President Susan Blake stood on the partially destroyed Coalition Senate platform. The grand hall that once housed representatives from 100 worlds was now damaged and dim, with emergency lighting casting long shadows across the floor. Susan faced the remains of the Coalition Council, 30 representatives from worlds that had not yet fallen to the void. The human delegation stood behind her, including Admiral Peters, Colonel Murphy, and the captains of Earth's growing fleet. 3 months ago, you told us to accept defeat," Susan began. "You said the Void Armada could not be stopped. You were wrong." She activated a holographic display showing the Battle of Luna, then switched to footage of 3 more recent battles where human ships had engaged and defeated Void forces. "Humanity has developed weapons that can penetrate Void shields. We've created tactics that the Void cannot predict. And we've done this despite the restrictions the Coalition placed on us for centuries." Murmurs spread through the alien representatives. Some looked ashamed, others angry. "We did not come here to blame you," Susan continued. "We came to offer an alliance. A true alliance, not one where humanity is kept contained and controlled. We will share our technology, our tactics, and our ships. In return, we ask for full access to Coalition research and resources." The Aldorian representative, one of the few survivors of their species, stepped forward. "Why should we trust humans with unlimited access to advanced technology? Your kind has a history of using such power for destruction." Admiral Peters stepped to Susan's side. "Because without us, there will be nothing left to destroy. The Void has already taken 60% of Coalition space. At their current rate of advance, they'll control the entire galaxy within 2 years." The council chambers fell silent as the truth of her words sank in. Finally, Keelan Noon spoke. "The Zenthari support Earth's proposal. We have worked closely with humans these past months. Yes, they are warriors, but they fight to protect, not to conquer." One by one, other representatives voiced their support. Even the Medusan Zorthak, who had been most skeptical of human methods, agreed. "I have witnessed their battle tactics," he admitted. "They are disturbing, but effective. And we need effectiveness now, not philosophical purity." As the council prepared to vote, an emergency signal interrupted the proceedings. The main screen activated to show Captain Kyle Rogers of the UES Venture. "Madam President," he said, his face grim, "we found something you need to see." The screen changed to show images of a massive structure hidden in the darkness between stars. It was unlike any void ship they had seen before, a vast spherical construct surrounded by hundreds of smaller vessels. "We believe this is their command center," Kyle explained. "Dr. Chen analyzed their communication patterns and led us right to it. But that's not all we found." The image zoomed in on a section of the structure. Inside were row upon row of what looked like stasis pods, each containing a humanoid figure. "They're organic," Kyle said. "The void ships are controlled by living beings, and based on Dr. Chen's analysis, they're genetically engineered slaves, created specifically for warfare." The council erupted in shocked conversations. Susan raised her hand for silence. "Captain Rogers, can you determine who created them?" "Not yet, but we found this." The screen showed an ancient symbol etched into the side of the structure. Several of the older council members gasped in recognition. "That's impossible," whispered the Eldorian representative. "That's the mark of the precursors, a civilization that vanished 50,000 years ago." Susan turned to the council. "It seems we're not fighting a random invader. We're fighting a weapon, one created long ago and perhaps only recently awakened." She looked back at the screen. "Captain Rogers, return to Coalition space immediately. The information you've gathered changes everything." As the emergency session ended, the Council voted unanimously to accept Earth's proposal. For the first time in its history, the Galactic Coalition would be led by humans in a time of war. Admiral Peters approached Susan as the Council members dispersed. "It's official," she said. "You're now leading the combined forces of every surviving species in the galaxy." Susan nodded solemnly. "Let's hope we're worthy of their trust." The Battle of Luna began at dawn. 20 void ships appeared on the edge of the solar system, moving in perfect formation toward Earth. In the command center beneath the White House, President Susan Blake watched the holographic display with Admiral Peters and the Coalition observers. "They're moving faster than expected," Admiral Peters said. "They'll reach Luna in 30 minutes. Susan nodded. "Are our ships in position?" "The Defiance, Courage, and Intrepid are behind the moon, just as planned. The Luna defense grid is powered up and ready." Zorthak, the Medusan observer, studied the display with his 4 eyes. "Your 3 ships cannot defeat 20 void vessels. Even with your new shields, the numbers are too great." Susan smiled slightly. "Who said anything about defeating them in direct combat?" As the Void Battle Group approached the moon, the Luna defense grid opened fire. Massive energy beams lashed out from hidden bases on the lunar surface, striking the Lid void ships. Their shields held, but they slowed their advance, focusing their attention on the moon. "They're taking the bait," Admiral Peters said. "Beginning Phase 2. Dozens of small objects detached from the lunar surface and moved toward the void ships. From a distance, they looked like escape pods fleeing the moon. The void ships ignored them, continuing to fire on the lunar bases. "What are those objects?" asked Keela Noon, the Zenthari ambassador who had joined them in the command center. "Mining explosives," Susan replied, "wrapped in materials that hide them from sensors." As the small objects reached the void formation, they detonated simultaneously. The explosions weren't powerful enough to destroy the void ships, but they created a massive cloud of lunar dust that enveloped the enemy fleet. "Now," Admiral Peters ordered over the comm. From behind the moon, the 3 human warships emerged, firing their main cannons. The void ships, temporarily blinded by the dust cloud, couldn't target effectively. 3 enemy vessels exploded immediately. Captain Olivia Grant's voice came over the comm from the Defiance. "Executing attack pattern Delta. Courage and Intrepid, follow my lead." The 3 human ships moved in a complex pattern, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. They fired continuously, their weapons penetrating the void shields just as they had at Alpha Centauri. In the command center, the Coalition observers watched in amazement. "This is not conventional warfare," said Zorthak. "These tactics. This is how humans have always fought," Susan explained. "We use the environment. We use deception. We use whatever advantage we can find. Your species evolved as peaceful explorers. Ours survived through conflict." On the display, 6 more void ships exploded. The remaining 11 began to retreat, moving back toward the edge of the solar system. "They're running," Admiral Peters said. surprised. No, Susan corrected her. They're regrouping, preparing for another attack. She turned to the communications officer. Contact Captain Rogers on the UES Venture. Execute Operation Blindside. On the far side of Earth, hidden from the battle, the UES Venture powered up its engines. Unlike the other human ships, it was smaller, faster, and designed for stealth. Captain Kyle Rogers looked at his crew. You heard the President. Let's move. The Venture accelerated away from Earth, not toward the retreating void ships, but in the opposite direction, following a course plotted by Dr. Nancy Chen, Earth's leading expert on void technology. If Dr. Chen's theory is correct, Kyle told his crew, the void ships communicate with each other through quantum entanglement. They have a central command structure somewhere. We're going to find it. Back in the command center, Susan watched as the remaining void ships disappeared into faster-than-light travel. The battle is won, Admiral Peters announced. 11 void ships destroyed, 9 heavily damaged. They've left the solar system. The coalition observers broke into excited conversation. For the first time, the Void Armada had been defeated in a major engagement. This changes everything, Keela Noon said to Susan. The coalition will want to know how you did this. They'll know soon enough, Susan replied. But this was just the beginning. We've shown we can defend ourselves. Now we need to take the fight to them. She looked at the display, where a small icon showed the Venture moving silently through space, away from Earth. And that, she added quietly, is exactly what we plan to do. Captain Olivia Grant stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Alpha Centauri. The ship's sensors immediately detected 5 void vessels moving through the system. Battle stations, she ordered, her voice calm. Weapons hot. The crew moved with practiced efficiency. Many had never seen combat before, but they had trained for this moment for months. The void ships have spotted us, reported Lieutenant Sam Parker from the sensor station. They're changing course to intercept. Olivia nodded. Just as we expected. Deploy countermeasures. The Defiance released dozens of small drones, each designed to confuse enemy sensors. It was a tactic no coalition ship had ever used. They considered such deception dishonorable. Humans had no such reservations. Void ships firing, Sam announced. The bridge shook as energy blasts hit the Defiance's shields. But unlike coalition shields that had failed against void weapons, these held firm. Their weapons aren't penetrating, said the shield officer, surprise in his voice. Dr. Patel's modifications are working. Olivia allowed herself a small smile. Target their lid ship. Fire main cannon. The Defiance's main weapon powered up, drawing energy from the ship's core. A beam of concentrated energy shot across space and struck the lid void ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the enemy vessel's shields flickered and died. A second blast tore through its hull, breaking it apart. The bridge crew cheered, but Olivia remained focused. Target the next ship. Maintain evasive pattern. One by one, the Defiance engaged and destroyed the void ships. The last 2 tried to escape, but the human vessel was faster and more maneuverable than they expected. Within an hour, all 5 enemy ships were destroyed. No casualties, reported the medical officer. Minor damage to decks 3 and 4. Olivia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Send a message to Earth. The engagement was successful. All enemy vessels destroyed. Back on Earth, the news of the Defiance's victory spread quickly. For the first time since the Void Armada appeared, someone had won a battle against them. Coalition representatives arrived at the White House within hours, demanding to know how humanity had achieved what their best fleets could not. President Susan Blake met them in the Situation Room, where screens showed the battle data from the Defiance. This is impossible, said Zorthak, a Medusan military observer. His tentacles waved in agitation. No one has penetrated void shields before. We did, Susan replied simply. And this is just the beginning. How? Demanded Zorthak. What technologies are you using? Susan exchanged looks with Colonel Murphy. They had agreed to share some information, but not all. "Let's just say we took a different approach to the problem," she said. "One the coalition would not have approved." Before Zorthak could respond, alarms blared throughout the building. Admiral Peters rushed into the room, her face grim. "Madam President, we've detected a void battle group entering the solar system. 20 ships heading straight for Earth." The coalition representatives looked terrified, but Susan remained calm. "They noticed us," she said. "Good. How long until they reach us?" 12 hours, Admiral Peters replied. Susan nodded. "Activate the Luna defense grid. Order the Defiance to return immediately. And launch the UES Courage and Intrepid. It's time to see what our ships can do together." As the room burst into activity, Zorthak approached Susan. "You seem almost pleased by this news," he said suspiciously. "Not pleased," Susan corrected him, "but ready. The Void has been picking off isolated worlds one by one. Now they'll face something they haven't encountered before. A species that's been preparing for them, studying them, and developing specific countermeasures. Outside Earth's atmosphere, defensive satellites moved into position. On the Moon, massive cannons powered up. And from Mars, 2 more human warships accelerated toward Earth, ready for battle. The first test of humanity's new military had succeeded. Now came the real challenge: defending their homeworld against a force that had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than their own. As night fell over Earth, billions of humans looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, the enemy was coming. But unlike the other species of the coalition, they didn't feel only fear. They felt ready. Linda Patil moved her hands through the holographic display, adjusting the weapon design floating before her. For 5 years, she had worked in secret, developing technology the coalition had forbidden. Now her lab beneath the Arizona desert hummed with activity as engineers built what she had only dreamed of creating. "Dr. Patel, the test results are ready," said her assistant, Jack Cooper. Linda nodded and followed him to the testing chamber. Inside, a small prototype of her shield-piercing cannon was mounted on a platform. On the far side of the room stood a barrier made with coalition shield technology, the same shields the Void Armada had cut through so easily. "Begin the test," Linda ordered. The cannon hummed to life. A beam of blue-white energy shot across the room and hit the shield. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the shield began to vibrate, its color shifting from blue to red. With a sound like breaking glass, it shattered. Linda smiled for the first time in weeks. "It works." 200 miles away, Colonel Alan Murphy watched the test results come in on his screen. He immediately called President Blake. "Madam President, Dr. Patel's weapon works. We can break through void shields." Susan's tired face brightened. "How soon can we put it on ships?" 3 weeks for the prototypes. The Zenthari are helping to speed up production. And the ships themselves. Alan switched his display to show the massive underground facility in the Nevada desert. Where there had once been empty space, now stood the frame of a warship unlike anything Earth had built before. "The UES Defiance will be ready for launch in 4 months. We're building 5 more just like her." Susan nodded. The coalition is losing ground faster than expected. The Void Armada reached Proxima Centauri last week. Alan's face hardened. That was too close to Earth for comfort. "We'll be ready," he promised. Across Earth and its colonies, humanity prepared for war. Factories that once made civilian goods now produced weapons and ship parts. Schools began teaching military strategy alongside regular subjects. And in training camps across the solar system, General Frank Winters drilled new recruits with methods that would have horrified the coalition. On Mars base, he watched as soldiers practiced with power armor that multiplied their strength tenfold. "Faster," he shouted as they ran the obstacle course. "The Void won't wait for you to catch your breath." A Zenthari observer, Teklavan, watched from nearby. "Your methods are intense," she commented. The coalition military trains for precision and minimal casualties. Frank snorted. That's why they're losing. War isn't pretty. It's bloody and messy, and the side willing to push hardest usually wins. He pointed to a soldier who had helped up a fallen comrade. See that? Teamwork. Humans fight best when we're fighting for each other. The Void doesn't understand that kind of bond. It's going to be our secret weapon. In orbit around Jupiter, the first fleet of defense satellites took position. They carried Linda Patel's shield-piercing technology, ready to defend the solar system if the Void arrived before the fleet was ready. 6 months after Project Phoenix began, President Blake stood on the observation deck of Luna Base. Below her, the UES Defiance gleamed in the starlight, ready for its maiden voyage. At over 2 miles long, it dwarfed anything humanity had built before. Its hull bristled with weapons no human ship had ever carried. Captain Olivia Grant saluted as she prepared to board. Your orders, Madam President. Susan handed her a sealed data chip. Take the Defiance to Alpha Centauri. The Void Scout fleet was detected there yesterday. Engage and destroy them. Olivia took the chip, her face solemn. This will be humanity's first direct action against the Void. Yes, Susan agreed. Once we do this, there's no going back. The Coalition wanted us to stay peaceful. They never understood that sometimes you have to fight for peace. As the Defiance prepared to launch, Susan looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Void Armada was destroying world after world. They had never encountered humans in battle before. That was about to change. President Susan Blake stared at the Zenthari ambassador with narrowed eyes. Keela Noon sat across from her in the Oval Office, flanked by Commander John Mercer and Admiral Kate Peters. Let me understand this, Susan said. You're telling me the Coalition has been limiting our technological development for 200 years. Keela Noon's silver skin shimmered as she nodded. The restrictions were disguised as safety protocols and environmental regulations. Your military expansion was contained through trade agreements that seemed beneficial but actually kept humanity dependent on Coalition resources. Why? Susan asked, her voice tight with anger. Because they studied your history, John said, understanding dawning on his face. They saw our world wars, our nuclear weapons. Yes, said Keela Noon. Most Coalition species evolved through cooperation. Violence in their histories was rare and limited. But humans, she paused. Your species survived through competition and warfare. You developed more weapons technology in your first 10,000 years than most species do in a million. Admiral Peters laughed bitterly. So they feared us. And now they need us. Keela Noon placed a small device on the table. It projected images of ancient human battles. Roman legions, medieval knights, World War II soldiers. The Coalition believes the Void Armada cannot be defeated. But I disagree. You humans have something no other species possesses. An understanding of war so deep it's written into your DNA. Susan stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the Washington Monument gleamed in the sunlight. Earth remained peaceful, untouched by the horrors sweeping across the galaxy. But for how long? What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador? Release humanity from Coalition restrictions. Build your warships. Develop your weapons. Fight as humans have always fought. Keela Noon's eyes glowed with intensity. My people will provide you with advanced technology the Coalition has kept from you. In exchange for what? John asked. Survival, Keela Noon replied simply, and a new place in the galactic order when the war is won. 2 days later, Susan Blake addressed the United Earth government in an emergency session. Representatives from every nation and colony listened as she explained the situation. The Coalition is falling, she said. Their peaceful ways have left them defenseless against an enemy that knows only destruction. They hid our true potential from us, fearing what we might become. Now we must decide. Do we remain bound by their restrictions, waiting for the Void Armada to reach us? Or do we become what we were always meant to be? The chamber was silent. Then Defense Minister George Clark stood up. Madam President, I've reviewed Ambassador Keela Noon's technical data. With the Zenthari technology, we could triple our fleet size in 6 months. Our weapons could be upgraded to match anything the Void has shown. But he hesitated. The Coalition regulations exist for a reason. Some of these weapons could destroy entire planets. If we don't act, Admiral Peters countered, the Void will destroy those planets anyway. The debate raged for hours. Some argued for caution, for waiting to see if the Coalition could find a peaceful solution. Others demanded immediate action. Finally, Susan called for a vote. The result was clear. Earth would go to war. That evening, in a secured bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, Colonel Alan Murphy received his new orders. His face was grim as he read them. Project Phoenix is authorized, Susan told him through the video link. You have full access to all military resources. The Zenthari will provide technical advisors. In 3 months, I want our first warfleet ready to launch. Understood, Madam President. Alan's voice was steady. And the Coalition restrictions. Officially, we remain members of the Coalition, Susan replied. Unofficially, do whatever it takes to build ships that can fight the Void. Humanity is entering this war, Colonel, and everything is about to change. As the call ended, Alan looked at the team assembled in the bunker. The best engineers, scientists, and military minds Earth had to offer, plus 5 Zenthari technical advisors, their silver skin gleaming under the harsh lights. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, we have work to do. Commander John Mercer stood at the viewing window of the Coalition Embassy on Aldoria Prime. The golden towers of the Aldorian capital glittered in the light of the setting sun. It would be the last sunset these towers would ever see. How long do we have? He asked, not turning from the window. Ambassador Ellen Wright checked her datapad. 6 hours, maybe less. The evacuation ships can't take everyone. Mercer nodded. After 300 years of peace under the Galactic Coalition, war had returned to the stars with a vengeance. The Void Armada had appeared from nowhere 3 months ago. No one knew what they wanted. They didn't respond to messages. They didn't take prisoners. They just destroyed everything in their path. We should return to Earth, Ellen said. The Coalition Council is meeting tomorrow. They need to hear from us. John watched as the Aldorians, the oldest and wisest species in the galaxy, ran through their streets in panic. The Aldorians had welcomed humanity to the stars when Earth first achieved faster-than-light travel. They had taught humans the ways of peace, and now they were being slaughtered. The defense fleet, he asked. Gone. The Void weapons cut through their shields like they weren't even there. The ground shook as the first bombs fell on the outskirts of the city. The Void Armada had arrived early. Time to go, Ellen said, grabbing John's arm. Their shuttle lifted off as the golden towers began to fall. By the time they reached their ship in orbit, the entire capital was burning. The Coalition's most sacred world, home to its founding species, was dying, and there was nothing anyone could do. 1 week later, John stood before the Coalition Defense Council on Centrum Station. Representatives from 30 species sat in a half-circle, their faces showing fear and defeat. The Void Armada had already destroyed 6 major worlds and dozens of colonies. The Vex Collective has fallen, announced Admiral Kate Peters, humanity's military representative. Their main fleet was destroyed at Rigel. Over 8 billion dead. The council chamber erupted in shouts and cries. The Vex had the most advanced technology in the Coalition. If they couldn't stop the Void Armada, no one could. We must sue for peace, said the Medusan delegate, his tentacles waving in agitation. They don't respond to communication, John replied. We've tried on every frequency, in every language. Then we must surrender unconditionally, said the Zenthari representative, Keela Noon. Perhaps they will spare some of us. John couldn't believe what he was hearing. The mighty Coalition, which governed half the galaxy, was giving up after just 3 months of war. Humanity will not surrender, Kate said firmly. Earth will fight. The chamber fell silent. Then laughter erupted from several delegates. Fight? With what? Asked the LRN representative. Your species has the smallest fleet in the coalition. You have no special weapons. Your homeworld is protected only because it's so insignificant the Void hasn't bothered with it yet. Kate's face flushed with anger, but John put a hand on her shoulder. We will return to our government with your decision, he said calmly. But know this, humanity has faced extinction before. We fought wars you couldn't imagine. The coalition taught us peace, and we embraced it, but we have not forgotten how to fight. As they left the chamber, Kelanun, the Zenthari representative, followed them. Commander Mercer, she said in a low voice, my ship leaves for Earth tomorrow. I would like to come with you. There are things about humanity the coalition has kept hidden, even from you. Things your people should know. What things? Kate asked suspiciously. Kelanun looked around to ensure no one was listening. The real reason humanity was invited to join the coalition. It wasn't for your benefit, it was to keep you contained. John and Kate exchanged glances. Because the coalition feared you, Kelanun continued. They feared what humanity might become. And now, with all hope vanishing, that fear might be our only chance of survival.